Welcome to the Wind Up with Will. I'm your host here again with another episode, and we're going to be talking about baseball today. It's been a little while since I've talked about baseball, but the season is winding down. The regular season's coming to an end. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about, including possible MVPs, possible Cy Young winners, who's going to make the playoffs, some stuff that's happened this past week, and just the incredibleness of Shohei Ohtani. So let's go ahead and get started here. I'm just going off my phone what we've got the standings. So currently, as the standings are, the New York Yankees clinched the AL East. I believe it was yesterday. Yeah, they clinched it yesterday with a 10-1 win over the Orioles that put them 5 up. Put that game, or was that yesterday? It might have been Wednesday. No, that was Thursday. Yes. Yeah, that put the game out of reach. If the Orioles would have won, that would have cut it to a three-game span where the Orioles have a chance with 3 games to go, but Yankees win puts them up 5. They clinch the AL East. They beat the Orioles 10-1 on Thursday to clinch the AL East. The Orioles have earned a playoff spot. They're enough up in the wild card that they don't have to worry about falling out of the playoffs, but there's still some playoff spots up for grabs in the American League. The other division winners are the Houston Astros, who are not quite what they have been in previous years. They're not going to be competing for the top 2 seeds for the first time in several years. And the American League Central was won by the Cleveland Guardians, Indians, Cleveland Baseball Club, whatever you want to call them. They have a 92-67 record. The Yankees have the top seed right now with a 93-66 record. The Astros are 86-73. So even if they win these last 3 games, they're not going to get to 90 wins this year. So kind of a down year for the Astros. I know they've had pitching problems and some injuries with their pitching. Kyle Tucker's been injured for a good part of the year. He was my MVP, my dark horse MVP pick to begin the year, and he was on like having MVP like numbers first half of the season, but his injuries kind of derailed that. But there's also some other great players in the American League that are in the MVP conversation. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the playoff race at the moment, the chase for the pennant. So in the wild card standings, no, that's not what I want. I hit the wrong thing. Sorry. In the wild card standings, the Orioles have the top spot in the American League with the Royals and Tigers. The Orioles are 88-71 with the top wild card spot, 3 games up. So they're good there. I'd be interested to know who has the tiebreaker. But the Royals and Tigers are tied for the last 2 wild card spots at 85-74. So if the season were to end today, both of those teams are in. It's just going to come down to seeding and who gets the higher seed there based on any tiebreakers that exist. And Minnesota is still alive, 3 games out. Who would have thought at the beginning of the year the Tigers were going to be a playoff team? I know I said that I thought the American League Central was not going to be as bad as people thought. That you outside of the White Sox, well, actually, I think I had the White Sox as kind of an okay team. I think I said several teams in that division, including the Tigers and Royals, have some young talent coming up and can be competitive in that division. I think I said the Twins would win the division if I remember my preseason projections or predictions. But the Twins have really collapsed here lately. They're 3 of 7 over their last 10. The Tigers are white hot. They're 9-1 over the last 10. They won 5 in a row. They're tied the Royals now. The Royals have struggled as well over their last 10. They're 3-7, even though they've won 3 in a row now. They're competing with the Tigers and Twins for those last wild card spots. I think that it's probably going to be Kansas City and Detroit. They're both up 3 games over the Twins. And the Tigers really have an easy. They play the White Sox the last 3 games. Who the White Sox are currently chasing a very bad record. They're chasing the worst record in modern history in MLB. They're currently 39-120. That's 120 losses, folks. That's horrible. The only other team that's lost that many in the modern era, so since 1901, is my New York Mets back in 1962. It's the worst season ever in modern history, and the White Sox have 3 games to avoid it. Now, they've won 3 in a row over the Angels to avoid that, With 6 games to go, they won 3 in a row to avoid it. But they're playing the Tigers, who are competing for a wild card spot. They're going to lose at least one, I think, if not get swept. So I'm happy to say the Mets won't be holding the worst record in modern history anymore, that it'll be the Chicago White Sox. They are almost 30 games worse in the standings. They're 24 games worse in the standings than the next worst team in the American League, the Angels, who they just swept. The Angels have 63 wins and 96 losses. The White Sox have 39 wins and 120 losses. Absolutely horrible season. Their general manager should be fired for the comments he made the other day, where he basically said, we're not going to go out and spend any money or get any more talent. We want to prove what we have with the players here and improve with them. And it's like, you're just going to set the record for most losses in the modern era. And you're not going to go out and sign at least a couple of people. Like, I think he should get fired over just saying stuff like that. Like, you have to try and put effort forward to be good, to improve. It's the White Sox are just in a horrible state right now. I feel sorry for the White Sox fans out there. But with 3 games to go, it's really down to the Tigers, Royals, and Twins. The Tigers have a super easy schedule over their last 3. The Royals have a difficult schedule, playing the Braves 3 games in Atlanta. Now, the Tigers are playing those 3 at the White Sox, I believe, if it will load. No, they get those at home. The Tigers get those 3 games at home against the White Sox. Royals are playing 3 games in Atlanta. Atlanta's chasing a wild card spot in the National League, so it's going to be a hard-fought series between the Royals and Braves. The Twins play the Orioles the last 3 games, who don't really have much to play for. I think they might not have anything to play for, because they might, I think they hold the tiebreaker over the Royals and the Tigers. Let's just take a look real quick here. I believe they split their season series with the Tigers, so I don't know who holds the tiebreaker from there, because I think it goes to like intra-division. With the Royals, I think they maybe hold it over the Royals. So it looks like the Orioles might have something to play for just to win 1 game so that they can clinch the top wild card spot. But the Twins have got to win 3 in a row to get in. So unless they can sweep the Orioles and have either the Tigers or Royals lose 3 in a row, they're not making it. So it's a little bit of a long shot for them, but there is a possibility. Over to the National League, the race is a little more close than 3 games. So the current division leaders are the Philadelphia Phillies at 94 and 65. The Milwaukee Brewers won their division as well with a record of 91 and 68. Phillies and Brewers have won the East and the Central. And the West, the Dodgers have won the West at 95 and 64. They're competing with the Philadelphia Phillies for the number 1 seed in the National League. And I guess the Dodgers won last night over the Pod. Yeah, they won over the Padres 7-2 last night to clinch the division. Padres still had a chance if they won that game. But the current wild card teams in the National League is you have the Padres with the top wild card spot with up 3 games over the Mets and Diamondbacks, who are tied in the standings based on win percentage. Mets are 87 and 70, Diamondbacks are 88 and 71. Mets have 1 less win and 1 less loss than the Diamondbacks, but it's because their series in Atlanta got messed up this weekend due to Hurricane Helene. And Atlanta is 1 game back of the Mets and Diamondbacks at 86 and 71. The series with the Mets, the last 2 games were delayed to Hurricane Helene. I was actually going to try and get a video out earlier this week because I was going to these 2 games with my mom and dad. Diehard Mets fan, hoping we could make the playoffs, get revenge for 2022 where we got swept at the end of the season and lost the division. So I'm thinking this is our year where we're going to get revenge. And Hurricane Helene rained us out. We actually went and ate at like Mellow Mushroom. We got back in the car to go back to the hotel, just kind of holding out hope that we'd get to see at least 1 game. It was looking bad for the last game of the series on Thursday, but we were holding out hope we'd maybe see a game on Wednesday. And we got back in the car after eating, and on the radio, both games are postponed till Monday. So both there's a doubleheader Monday for the Mets and Braves, and this is going to be determining who makes the playoffs possibly. There's a lot of different scenarios that could break out here. The Diamondbacks and Padres play each other the last 3 games. And with the Padres not having a chance at winning the West anymore, they might not be as floored playing. Sorry, my camera's messing up here. The Diamondbacks might not be, or the Padres might not be as eager to try and go out and win games against the Diamondbacks as they would have been if they were still competing for the NL West. So they probably won't roll over because they don't want to get rusty going into the playoffs, but they're probably not going to try as hard the next 3 days as opposed to if they were in competition for the division. So it gives the Diamondbacks chances to win games because they're in competition with the Mets and Braves for the last 2 wild card spots. Only 2 of those teams are going to get in. They've done away with the tie-breaking games. Those aren't in existence anymore, and the wild card series starts Tuesday. So it's very unfortunate that the Mets and Braves have to play Monday in a doubleheader because whoever wins is traveling somewhere Tuesday to start the playoffs. Very unfortunate. MLB could have avoided this. This past Monday, the Mets and Braves both had an off day. They could move one of the games to Monday from the Mets-Braves series this past Monday. And they could move the start time up on Wednesday from the 7:15, 7:20 start to 11 o'clock in the morning and gotten the game in. We got to Atlanta around noon, and there's no rain. Like, it was maybe sprinkling. Like, they could have gotten one game in there, and they could have moved a game to Monday. They knew over the weekend that Hurricane Helene and the projections that there's going to be a lot of rain coming up into Atlanta. They could have moved the game. They could have done things differently with that series, and that way there's a lot of rumors circulating that the Braves didn't want to lose revenue from having those games at night. They didn't want to move the games. MLB didn't force the issue. MLB could have forced the issue. Really, regardless of whose fault it is, whether it's the commissioners or the Braves or the Mets didn't want to move the start times, there's a lot of stuff flying around, even though likely it's the Braves and the commissioners' fault for not moving the game. The commissioner or MLB really should have said, "Hey, we're going to move these games. We're not keeping them Wednesday and Thursday night due to the weather coming in. They need to be moved up earlier so we can get in these games before the playoffs." Because, say in another situation, say the Braves are 5 games out of the playoffs, they don't make up these games because it would already. I mean, if it didn't determine the Mets and Diamondbacks seeding, they wouldn't make them up. If it didn't affect any seeding at all or who was making the playoffs, it wouldn't matter. I remember back, I think it was 2016 when the Cubs won the World Series. They were playing, I think it was, don't quote me on this, it might be a year around that time, where they were playing the Pirates, I think the last game of the year, one of the last games of the year, and it was tied, and it was like in the 5th or 6th inning or something, and due to rain, they just called the game. It ended in a tie because it wasn't going to affect the standings at all. The Pirates were out of it. The Cubs were like up enough in the standings where it wasn't going to affect their seed. So the game didn't matter. So they didn't need to make it up. So occasionally you run into situations like that. But in this case, you've got 3 teams here competing for the playoffs, all within a game of one another. You got to make up the games. And really, MLB is really at fault here for not moving the games up earlier. And it's also a massive disservice to the fans. Like, I took time off from work these 3 days, Wednesday through Friday, just to be able to go to both of these games and maybe hope to see my Mets clinch a playoff spot or put ourselves in a better position for the playoffs. And I didn't get to see any games. Now, the games are on Monday, but I can't take PTO off just like that, and most people can't either. So it's a real disservice to the fans who are looking to see games, and you can say, well, the weather and everything, and it's unfortunate because sometimes weather just comes up. But they really could have moved the game Wednesday up to noon at Wednesday or to 11 in the morning and given fans a chance to see the game, and all that, just allow the teams to get the games in because you need to get these games in. So it's a real just unfortunate situation there for MLB, and it makes MLB look really bad for not having this figured out beforehand. Now you got the Mets and Braves having to play doubleheader on Monday, and it's probably going to determine who makes the playoffs, and then they have to play the very next day. Just not a good look for MLB. And it's hard on travel on the Mets because we have to go to Milwaukee this weekend, Friday through Sunday, playing the Brewers, who luckily don't really have anything to play for in the standings. because it looks like, well, actually, they could catch the Phillies and the standings, but they're not. They're 3 games out, and I don't know who holds the tiebreaker there. I'm going to assume the Phillies have the tiebreaker. So I really don't know what the Brewers have to play for, so that might actually help the Mets, but we have to travel to Milwaukee, play there, and then travel back to Atlanta for a doubleheader on Monday. And then if we win and get into the playoffs, we have to fly somewhere else possibly on Tuesday. So it's just a lot of travel in a short time for the Mets. Now the Braves, they don't have to go anywhere. They have a home series this weekend against the Royals, so they don't have to travel at all. And then the doubleheader Monday is going to be back in Atlanta. They don't have to travel for that either. So the Braves are in a nice situation where they don't have to travel. Now it hurts them that they had their 2 best starters lined up for the game Wednesday and the game Thursday against the Mets. Those guys are going to they're going to have to pitch this weekend for the Braves to stay in contention. They're just on regular rest, keep them in their normal rotation. You're going up against the Royals who have games to play for. They're desperately playing to try and make sure they make it in the playoffs this weekend, and they're competing with the Tigers for who gets the 5 or 6 seed there. So they have games to play for. They're going to be playing to win. They're not just going to try and roll over or just kind of go out there and go through the motor. They're going to try and win. And so the Braves are going to have to throw their top 2 starters this weekend to try and win games to keep pace with the Mets and Diamondbacks. And then they're going to have to turn around Monday and they won't have Chris Sale or Max Fried against the Mets. So, and the Mets don't really have a bona fide top 8 like ace starter, even though Sean Manaea has probably been our best pitcher all year. But it's not as big a difference between Chris Sale and Charlie Morton on the Braves as it is between Sean Manaea and, let's say, Luis Severino or Quintana. Like the Mets just have really solid starting pitching all the way around, and not one that is just leaps and bounds better than everyone else. Well, with the Braves, Chris Sale is obviously their best pitcher and is probably going to win the NL Cy Young this year. So having him and Max Fried miss the series against the Mets is unfortunate for the Braves, and actually is in the Mets' benefit not to have to face those guys. But it's going to be really interesting. There's some different scenarios that could go out. If the Diamondbacks and Mets both win out, they're in. If the Diamondbacks and Braves win out, they're in. Essentially, each of these 3 teams holds their own destiny in their own hands. They win out, they're in. That's just plain and simple. With 5 games to go for the Mets and Braves, and the Diamondbacks have 3. Now, there is a situation where if the Diamondbacks lose out this weekend, which is not likely with the Padres not having anything to play for, the Mets and Braves could make the playoffs, but it's going to come down to it's going to come down to at least one of the games Monday, because right now in the standings, the Mets and Braves are tied for the tiebreaker. They've split the season series so far. That the head-to-head is the tiebreaker. Now, if the Braves win Game 1 of the doubleheader Monday, they don't have to play. They could, in theory, not have to play the second game, just simply because the Braves would hold the tiebreaker with the Mets. Now, that's it. If Game 2 does not affect whether the Mets can beat or whether the Mets and Diamondbacks would be tied, or they need to play another game to determine that, because the Mets hold the tiebreaker over the Diamondbacks. So if the Mets and Diamondbacks tie in the standings, the Mets will have the higher seed or make the playoffs over them. Really confusing. They really just bring back tie-breaking games. That's just an aside. But if the Mets win Game 1, they will definitely have to play Game 2, because then the season series, well, currently the Braves hold the edge on the season series. Right? No, it's tied. If the Mets win, they will definitely have to play the second game. And if the Braves win the first game, it'll put the game in. All right, I guess the Braves are up 1 game right now in the head-to-head on the season series. I'm getting confused. The Braves are up 1 game in the season series. If the Mets win Game 1, they'll be tied again, and they'll need to play another game to determine who's ahead. But if the Braves win the first game, they hold the season series. The Mets can't catch them in the season series, and they don't have to play it if it's not going to affect the Mets and Diamondbacks and the standings, if that's already determined. But there's a lot that can happen this weekend on who gets in and who doesn't. So it's really going to come down to, I've said it all along, I've said it for over a month, that this last series between the Mets and Braves is going to determine who gets in. I still think that. I think the Braves will probably win 2 out of 3 against the Royals. The Mets will win 2 out of 3 against the Brewers. It'll keep the Mets and Braves within one game. The Diamondbacks, we'll see what happens with them and the Padres. Maybe they win 2 out of 3, and it really just comes down to the Mets and Braves on Monday to see who gets in. Now, if the Diamondbacks were to win, let's just do a hypothetical. If all 3 teams win 2 out of 3 this weekend, not playing each other, Mets and Braves don't play till Monday, we would have the Diamondbacks at 90 and 72. We would have the Braves at 88 and 72, and the Mets at 89 and 71, being a game up on. Actually, we would be tied still with the Diamondbacks. No, we'd be a game up on them, and because of the win column. No, I'm sorry, we'd still be tied with them based on win percentage. We'd be tied with the Diamondbacks technically with 2 games to go because of how they do the standings, and the Braves would still be 1 game back. Now, if the Braves were to win, okay, I'm confusing myself. Let's just do it this way because me and my dad have played out the hypotheticals. If all 3 teams are tied in the standings, the Braves would be the 5 seed because they hold a tie. If they would hold a tiebreaker over, because they would win at least one more game. They would, if all 3 of them tied, the Braves would hold the tiebreaker over the Mets and the Diamondbacks and get the 5 seed. And then the Mets hold the tiebreaker over the Diamondbacks, so we would get in over the Diamondbacks. So that's a situation that could happen where the Mets and Braves both get in if all 3 are tied, or if the Diamondbacks just collapse this week and lose the last 3, Mets and Braves win enough where they get in. The last 2 games don't matter as much because both teams are in. It's just seeding on who do you want to play more, the Brewers or Padres. I've spent a lot of time talking about the standings, but I'm probably very confusing in the last few minutes, so I apologize if you couldn't follow that. There's if you can go online, you can look at some articles, you can just look at the standings yourself and see how it's going. I could probably just show a visual right now. So in the National League, that is what the current standings are. It's probably not great. There we go. It's current standings. The Mets hold that second wild card spot, or tied with the Diamondbacks, and Braves are 1 game back. And then in the American League, you've got, that is the current wild card standings. If it will load, yeah. So that's the current standing there. If I was better at editing, I could just edit in the standings next to me. Hopefully, I can get to that in the next few months where I can learn to actually edit. So, but moving on now, we're going to talk briefly about the MVP and Cy Young races and how that's going. I know this video has gone over 20 minutes. Don't want it to go too much longer. But in the American League, there's 3 decent choices for the MVP in the American League. And you could argue there's other players in contention like Jose Ramirez and so on and so forth down the line. Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s had a great year. But there's really 3 guys that I think are in contention for the American League MVP. And that is Aaron Judge, Bobby Witt Jr., and Juan Soto. Now, Juan Soto was traded to the Yankees this past offseason. He has played phenomenally for them. He has 41 home runs on the year. He's batting .288. He has 108 RBIs, and if I believe, he's probably leading the league in walks and on-base percentage. He's got a .418 on-base percentage and 126 walks. Yeah, so he's had a great year for them. This is arguably the best season of his career. His batting average is a little lower than it has been in previous years, but his on-base percentage is up there again. His OPS is .990. He's got the highest WAR of his career at 7.9. The most second actually the third most RBIs in his career at 108, most home runs ever in his career at 41, 164 hits, played 155 games, 128 runs scored, 108 RBIs. He's been phenomenal for the Yankees, and he would probably be the MVP if it wasn't for his teammate and Bobby Witt Jr. Now, Bobby Witt Jr. at one point in the season was batting around, I think, 350. He's the young star shortstop for the Royals. He's leading MLB this season in batting average at 332, all of MLB, not just the American League. He's batting 332 with 32 home runs, 109 RBIs, 31 stolen bases, 389 on base percentage, 591 slugging, 981 OPS, and 9.3 WAR. He's got 45 doubles, 209 hits, 124 runs. Just playing phenomenally this season. And I think he would probably be MVP. The Royals are in a playoff spot. They're chasing the playoffs. The Yankees have won their division. So both these guys in other years would probably be the top two front runners. And they, based on how voters tend to vote, they would probably give it to Juan Soto because he plays for the Yankees. But Bobby Witt Jr., in my mind, would be the MVP, or at least how I would vote for MVP if it wasn't for the top spot, and that's Aaron Judge. He's just been phenomenal this season, and even though I don't think it's likely based on the game, just 3 games left in the season, he's been in contention for the Triple Crown this season in hitting. He's batting 325, which is currently third in MLB. He's actually tied second with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Like I said, another possible MVP candidate, but there's just too many guys in front of him. Aaron Judge is batting 325, second in MLB. He's got 58 home runs. He's 2 away from hitting 60 for the second time in his career. 144 RBIs, 144 ribeyes. That's awesome. 144 runs batted in. He scored 122 runs. He has 180 hits. He's got a 325 on base, a 325 batting average, 461 on base, 708 slugging, an OPS of 1.169, a WAR of 10.8. This might be one of the best seasons in MLB history. He is, without a doubt, the MVP in the American League this season. And this year, I would say, might even be better than his 62 home run season a few years ago. He has more RBIs. He doesn't have more runs, but he has more hits. He has more doubles. He has a much higher batting average, a much higher on base, much higher slugging, a higher OPS, and a slightly higher WAR. Now, he's probably won't hit 62 home runs like he did a couple years ago, but I think he can get to 60. I think he's actually hit a home run in 5 straight games. He has had a phenomenal season, and he is going to go down as one of the greatest home run hitters of this generation, perhaps of all time. Now, career-wise, he only has 315, but he came up later. So we'll see how many total he gets for his career, but really, really carving himself a plaque in the Hall of Fame right now. Phenomenal season for Aaron Judge. He's the American League MVP. On over to the National League, I think this one I don't think is as close. Now there's a few players that are kind of in the running for this. We can kind of go through those, but this has been a foregone conclusion. I think from the beginning of the year, this was my preseason pick, and that is Shohei Ohtani. Just that he's the best player. Yeah, I'm recording a vlog. The American League MVP currently would be not American League. The National League MVP would be Shohei Ohtani. He is the best player in baseball, and he is having possibly the best season ever in MLB. Let's just look at his stats real quick. He's batting 305 on the season, and if it wasn't for Luis Arraez with the Padres, he would maybe be in contention for the Triple Crown in the National League. He has 190 hits on the season. He's batting 305 with a 387 on base percentage, 643 slugging, over 1,000 OPS, 8.8 WAR. He has 53 home runs on the year, 126 RBIs, 56 stolen bases with only 4 caught stealings. and 190 hits, 131 runs scored. Phenomenal season for Shohei Ohtani, and he had perhaps the greatest game ever the other night against the Marlins in their 20-4 win. The Dodgers 20-4 win over them. He was 6 for 6 with 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, 4 runs scored, 2 doubles, 2 stolen bases, and one of the doubles he was tagged out running to third. If he'd made it to third, he would have also hit for the cycle in the same game that he hit 3 home runs. That would have been, without a doubt, the best game perhaps ever in MLB history. He has done phenomenally, and he is the National League MVP. He was my preseason pick to win the National League MVP. He has done great in his first year with the Dodgers and is really leading them to the playoffs this year. Other players would be Marcell Ozuna with the Braves. I think he'll probably finish top 3. He's batting .310 on the year, competing with Luis Arraez for the league lead. He has 39 home runs, 102 RBIs, 182 hits, 95 runs scored. He's been the Braves' best hitter all year, especially with the injuries they've had, kept them kind of in the postseason hunt. He's a DH, and that's going to hurt, just like Ohtani, but Ohtani's just too good of numbers to not pick him as the MVP with 50 stolen bases and 50 home runs. First person ever to do that. Ronald Acuna Jr. last year was the first person ever with 40 home runs and 70 stolen bases in a season. And Shohei Ohtani has perhaps went up to him this year with over 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in the same season. Phenomenal season. But don't take away from Acuna. He had a great year last year. And then I think the player who'll probably finish third in the MVP in the National League, and that is going to be Francisco Lindor of the New York Mets, shortstop. He's played phenomenally for the Mets over the second half of the season. Really, since June kicked in, he has been phenomenal. He's went from batting like a little over 200 all the way up to 271, 31 home runs on the year, 86 RBIs, 103 runs scored, 163 hits, playing Gold Glove caliber defense. He has 27 stolen bases. And if he didn't have the back kind of spasms he's had over the last week, he probably would have gotten to 30 stolen bases and had a 30 season, 6.6 WAR on the year. A lot of people, especially Mets fans, are pushing for him to be the MVP in the National League because he plays defense as compared to Shohei, who just bats. And Shohei hasn't even pitched this year due to his Tommy John surgery. And I understand the argument for that, and I love the argument, and I think that probably gets Lindor ahead of Marcell Ozuna and the MVP voting, maybe gets him the number 2 spot. It's just really hard to beat Shohei's numbers with what he's done on the year. I think he's clearly the MVP. Now, briefly to talk about the Cy Young voting, how that's going to go down. I think in the National League it's going to be Chris Sale. He is currently leading in every Triple Crown category. He leads the National League in wins, ERA, and strikeouts. And in MLB totals, he's tied for first in wins, he's first in ERA, and he is second in strikeouts in MLB. He's had a phenomenal season, just resurrecting his career from what it has been, just a ton of injuries with the Red Sox. He's 18-3 on the year, 2.38 ERA, and 225 strikeouts with 177 innings. He's been phenomenal for the Braves. He's clearly their ace, and I think he's the Cy Young in the National League. I think a few other pitchers like Zach Wheeler is in contention. He's 16-7, 2.56 ERA, and 213 strikeouts. He won the Cy Young last year. I'm sorry, not last. I think he won it 2 years ago, actually. But Zach Wheeler is in the running for the Cy Young. He's not going to win it this year. I think it's going to be Chris Sale. Over in the American League, I think it's going to be Tarek Skubal of the Detroit Tigers. He's had a phenomenal season. He's 18-4 on the year, 2.39 ERA, is second in MLB, first in the American League. And he's first in strikeouts with 228. So he might win the Triple Crown of pitching in the American League as Chris Sale wins it in the National League. What a great year this has been for stats. Aaron Judge's great year. Shohei Ohtani's great year. 2 great pitching years with Tarek Skubal and Chris Sale. Been phenomenal. I think Skubal probably has it in the bag. I think there's another pitcher that's been in the running all year, and at one point I thought he might win it, but I think he's probably going to finish top 3 now, and that's Seth Lugo, former Mets pitcher. He's been a starting pitcher for the Royals this year. At age 34, he's had his best season ever as a starting pitcher. He went 16-9 for the Royals, a 3.03 ERA, 178 strikeouts, over 200 innings pitched. He's been phenomenal for them, and at one point in the year, I thought he was going to be the leading candidate for for the American League Cy Young. I don't think he wins it, but there's a chance. And I think also Emmanuel Clase for Cleveland, their closer, has a good chance getting some votes in the Cy Young. He might finish runner-up, actually. 47 saves on the season and a 0.61 ERA with 66 strikeouts and 0.65 WHIP. Absolutely phenomenal season for Cleveland's closer. Now that's all I've got for this video. Hopefully I don't have to re-record it from the interruption earlier, but hopefully I can edit that out. But that's all I've got for this video. Let me know your thoughts down below. Who's going to win the Cy Young, the MVP in both leagues, and who is making the playoffs? Are my Mets going to make the playoffs? Are we going to choke again? And who's going to win the World Series? Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.